Dr. Daniel Cross Turner, Head of Programming and Outreach for the Georgetown County Library System. Welcome to Digibridge 2.0, a series of 12 humanities lectures by local experts on various elements of Georgetown County's deep, diverse history and culture. All presentations are free and open to the public and will take place on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. in March, April, and May at one of 3 Georgetown County Library branches. During March, we're right here at our beautiful new Southern Georgetown Library located at 4187 Powell Road in Georgetown. In April, we'll host 4 more exciting presentations at our Carvers Bay Library at 13048 Choppy Road in Hemingway. And in May, we'll close out our Digibridge series at Andrews Library on 105 North Morgan Avenue in Andrews. All 12 presentations will also be made available for viewing afterwards on the Georgetown County Library YouTube channel. The Digibridge 2.0 series is supported with a growth grant from South Carolina Humanities with funding provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities. South Carolina Humanities is a not-for-profit organization inspiring, engaging, and enriching South Carolinians with programs on literature, history, culture, and heritage. And we're thrilled today. We want to say thank you. We have our branch manager in the background, Sheree Drayton. Thank you for joining us. And we also have the honor of our Georgetown County Library Director, Dwight McInvale, is right here with us as well. So thrilled to have them. And we always say thank you to Truman Wins, our wonderful tech specialist who makes everything run smoothly. And today we have a special treat, a great friend of the library and friend of Georgetown and Georgetown County, Dedric Bonds, historian and educator, among many other things, good things. Picked out to be picked on, the life of Reverend M.M. Dentley, a humanitarian, is the name of the talk that he's going to give us today. A graduate of Morehouse College, that wonderful school down in Georgia. Dedric Bonds performs several central roles in the Georgetown community. He's a reporter for the local newspaper, a call-in talk show host, managing director for the historic Wynya Auditorium, and a history teacher at the Georgetown School of Arts and Sciences. And today, he is going to shed light on a special figure in the history of Georgetown County's religious and spiritual life. So please welcome Mr. Dedric Bonds.
Thank you, Dr. Turner.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I have to clear the record. I did teach at the Georgetown School of Arts and Sciences. After taking an MBA last year, I am now back in the public school system teaching business. But history is my passion, as I am a trained historian, Morehouse and Clark, Atlanta. And so anyway, good afternoon. My name is Dedric Bonds, and I am honored to share this podium for Georgetown County Library's second installment of the Digibridge series. I'm especially honored to share the podium with some of our county's leading historians and experts who have shared with us their findings and their work. Mr. McInvale, as I look at your smiling face and the manager back there, I have to first, which is not in my notes, acknowledge and thank my love, my wife, my bride, for always sacrificing for my family and I. And today is no different than what she would normally do for me. So I appreciate you and I love you. Thank you. Thank you to Mr. Dwight McInvale, the County Library Director, Dr. Dan Turner, Head of Programming and Outreach, for their continued trust in the stories that I tell that contribute to the recorded diversity of our great county. I cannot forget my man Truman Wins. I believe I must have sent Truman my files, must have been midnight or 5 o'clock this morning or something, and as I knew he would, he responded and said, "I got you." And so I appreciate it. Ms. Drayton, thank you. You have a beautiful facility here. And I just gotta say that I am always thankful for and in awe of the work librarians do. There's a secret part of me that is still wanting to get that Master's of Library Science degree. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, in 2022, what a librarian does is definitely more than check out books.
Yep.
Librarians are some of our community gatekeepers, and I am thankful for the services that they continue to provide to our communities. Now, today, this is not as much an academic talk as it is a talk of my heart and my memory. I am beyond honored to speak on the life of Reverend M. Dentley, Maddie May Dentley, for who Georgetown County and other places near and far, she was a true humanitarian. And she also happened to be my grandma. Maddie was born a breeched baby in Georgetown, South Carolina, May 5th, 1919. Breeched born. Old folk would say that babies who were born breech were born either wise or foolish. Ms. Drayton, you heard that before. Maddie, for the good of many, was born the former, as wise as they come. And anyone who knew her knew that she always had a good quip. And the one that immediately dropped into my spirit as I was thinking about as wise as they come, she would say, as the day is long and nightfall come for good measure. Her mother was Janie Cooper, and though not her biological, Alonzo Cooper was her father. On occasions, I remember that she would mention her biological father. He was on the sea a lot. I remember her saying that. I can't remember exactly what it was he did, but I remember her discussing him being on the sea quite a bit before he succumbed. And she did have a biological sister from that father. Her name was Lizzie Canteen. And they bore a very and an amazingly striking resemblance to each other. It was always crazy to see that resemblance, even though I knew they were sisters. She had other siblings from my great-grandfather prior to the marriage to Big Mama, or Janie. The oldest would have been Mary, with two other brothers, Benjamin and James. And after the marriage of Janie to Alonzo, or Yank, Wilson was born. Known to many simply as Sister Dentley, even to non-churchgoers, she was called and known to others, depending on the caller, by other names too. To her siblings, in particular, that older sister, Mary, Aunt Blossom, which is another story for another time, she was known as Snook. To the members of her immediate family in that house that she raised, though it was something different. She was always known and affectionately called and still in my heart and memory, Mamie. While she encouraged, enforced, and expected her family to perform academically, she didn't have much of an education to speak of. She made it as far as 6th grade. She spoke fondly, however, of her school years that she remembered, and her teachers, like Professor Beck. She always knew and believed, though, that God had called her to much more in her life. By October 8th of 1938, she was 19. Her life had changed forever. She had married the man God answered her prayers with, her words, and that man's name was English Dentley. And for the next 61 plus years, they would continue to do life together. Dad, or English, would after World War II eventually find employment with International Paper for 40 plus years. Mamie, besides her family, would find another part of her mission, the vocation that she felt God was calling her to, the ministry. She grew up Methodist, and in Georgetown County, that's historically alive, you know. She eventually, though, became associated with Pentecostalism. I think that was through my grandfather, whose mother was a pastor, and church founder. Interestingly enough, Pentecostals allowed for women ministers. Many of them, besides being members and officers, were also pastors and founders of churches and missions. My grandmother fit right in. By the early to mid-1940s, according to this article here in Georgetown Times almost 40 years ago, she was ordained as one of the first women ministers in the state. She had not only been ordained to preach, she was also called and began a career spanning some 50 years pastoring. She eventually became a renowned evangelist, a dynamic and, as the old folk again would say, flat-footed preacher, and an awesome administrator, if I may add. She always had a heart for people. Over the course of her career, she pastored some 18 churches through her denominational faith, the Fire Baptized Holiness Church of God of the Americas, otherwise known as FBH for short. Founding at least 2 ministries and assisting in the founding of several others, still vibrant congregations throughout the region. Although she would not, as she did not see it as such, she rose through the ranks of pastors. At the time she started, I believe there were probably 30 or so pastors that made up the district that she was a part of, and eventually she was elevated to what was called a district president. And this was a church district-wide leadership role that she held for roughly 30 plus years. This role actually fit her. It was the district overseer of what is called in church missions. The work of the church, or the work that the church does outside of the church. It was a natural fit. And the role also called for someone who was adept at fundraising. She was good at it. She always said over the years, though, that in life it took the 3 G's: grace, grit, and greenback. And when she knew the task that needed to be performed, she was skilled at always hitting the target. As a pastor, a district leader, or both at the same time. She was known as a pastor that can always get the job done. As a matter of fact, to the board of bishops for the church that she was in, her name was more, because they knew that she could always produce. She could get the job done. She pastored in many varied places over the years and throughout the region again, Bucksport, Sumter, Midway, which is in Maryville, Georgetown, in Georgetown, Conway and Marion, to name a few. Her career as a pastor, I'm sure she would say, for her, was rewarding because it was what God would have had her to do. That, however, was not all that would be charged to her hands. Not only the eternal, the soul, but as much of the temporal as she could help to improve. As an extension of her work as a pastor, she came into contact with parishioners and others who sometimes needed extra help. Life, as we all know, is not always kind. But Reverend Dentley felt that it was her mission to fill in the gap for needy individuals and families alike, be it a bill, furniture needs, or clothes. She and her husband, English, or Deacon Dentley, would step in. After years of doing it on my granddaddy's check and her meager pastoral income, they decided by the late 1950s to organize the Helping Hand Club. Originally, dues was $1 a month. The charter members were Florence Fishburne, the godmother to all of their grandchildren and their lifelong best friend, Mr. and Mrs. Andrew Great, Dora Smalls, Peter Smalls, and John Smalls. All of these people I remember as a kid. The Helping Hand Club was anchored by a 3-doored front building that sat in my grandparents' backyard, and it was affectionately known as the clubhouse. It was built by my granddaddy's hands. The furthest door of the clubhouse was where furniture was stored. The middle door and the main door was where clothes were stored. And the last door to a recessed entrance was the room where I remember 2 huge deep freezers being. People from all around knew about my grandmother, Sister Dentley, and her work. Over the years, just like people in need would be free to have anything she had, people that wanted to donate over the years came along too. For over 40 years, along with pastoring, this became her life's work. Feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and seeing to the last, the least, and the dispossessed. She was small in stature, but large in spirit. She preached with power and demonstration. She gave her all. Georgetown and her people were the better for what Sister Dentley was led to do. She believed God and acted according to his word. She never liked attention for what she did. One of the verses of the Bible that she would quote all the time that I remember is, "If you see your brother in need and shut your bowels of compassion, how dwelleth the love of God in you?" But toward the end of her career, as rightfully so, she was recognized widely for her humanitarian deeds. She was an inaugural Dreamkeepers inductee. She was honored by many civic and community organizations, and she ultimately was awarded an honorary doctorate for her 50-plus years body of work. She probably would not like the fact right now that I found her the subject of a public talk, but her life's work deserves it. She made a difference, and people's lives were impacted for it, for the good and God's glory. I'm eternally thankful for the extraordinary lives she and my grandfather led. I am her legacy. Thank you.
Would you take some questions if folks have
Certainly.
any questions
Certainly.
for you?
Dr. Turner, go ahead. Do you have one?
I will, you talked about that the breech baby, which I hadn't heard before, that your grandmother was a breech baby, and do you know where that, you may have said, I may have missed it, but where that is sort of rooted in, that kind of...
Actually in the fact that the positioning of the baby is reversed. So rather than the feet coming out, which come out first?
The feet came out first.
The feet come out first. But in this case, a breech baby is it's the reverse.
Yeah, so normally the head comes out.
Here's the deal, Dr. Turner. A breech baby, the positioning is reversed.
Right.
The opposite of the normal thing. And so when that baby is born, it's a very high likelihood that the umbilical cord can catch the baby's neck.
Right.
And particularly in 1919, when you couldn't go to a hospital and you had to be delivered by a midwife who had no formal training, so to speak, it was very precarious, not just the delivery of the baby, but the survival of the mother, which was always at risk for black women. Still is in 2022. So if a baby was to survive that, the old folk would say that they would either have been born wise or foolish. That's where that comes from.
Great. And there is that kind of, as you showed, she was a survivor. And obviously wise.
Yes.
But also that survivor instinct that kicked in.
Exactly. And she was always gritty like that.
Yeah.
I don't know what, I know that she was always warm and endearing to people. Had to be. People come into your house, you don't know them, but your mission is to help them. I would imagine that she had to be very discerning. Obviously loving, but there was that part of her that was just, she was a soldier, no less. But my talk is about her, but being in a good marriage, I don't know how much of her would have been possible without my grandfather, or vice versa. To number one, have been married and survived marriage happily for over 60 plus years. And so I believe in providence. I believe in God's divine alignment. And so I am also convinced that their lives was certainly a demonstration of God's providence. Because not only did he make provisions for them, but through them, provisions for many other people.
Dedric, the time in which she was active, I would think there was not much of a safety net for people as there is today.
My mother and I were talking about this the other day, and when I think about my grandparents, my grandmother was a nonprofit before nonprofits were popular, or even possible. And she always had a way of knowing how to do things. So, like I said, she literally, they were using the income from her pastoring, and in the church that she pastored in, there was no set salary. There was no set salary. Whatever the members could afford. Sometimes it was food, right? And then my grandfather's salary from International Paper. And they realized that the longer they were doing it, the more people were coming. And they realized that they couldn't continue to do it like that. And so that's where the organization of the Helping Hand Club came in the 50s. In the 50s. And that's what they did for the next 40 plus years. I was born in 76. But my earliest childhood memories are of learning how to be compassionate to people who were less fortunate. I probably knew that before I knew anything else. And it was because of the environment that I was raised in, you know? And then there was always a certain sensitivity being a pastor's grandkid anyway. You know, my mom by that point was divorced, so I was always with my grandparents. Oh man, and the friends that they had, and the long car rides, and the stories that would be told, right? But yeah, it's fond memories. And they were a phenomenal force.
You're so eloquent every time I hear you speak.
Thank you.
The way you write your presentations and
Thank you.
deliver them, they're stupendous.
Thank you.
Is this an echo of your grandmother?
I was going to ask something similar, that you're living, I think you said you're living legacy in a way, and both you and your wife are educators, and while you're not a pastor per se or minister, but do you see a connection on that level maybe as well? It's kind of serving other people and helping them in that compassion.
Good memories. You have
Yeah.
many good memories. I know that you do. Now, this is more of a factual question. Our current Helping Hands, is that her organization?
No, it's
So
not.
it's distinct, okay?
It's not. I apologize, I couldn't get it out. Said I wasn't gonna cry. Yes, to answer your first question. The second question, no. That was just the name they came up with. That was the name they came up with in line with what they were doing. Yeah. Helping Hands.
What a good story.
Thank you.
Wonderful
Thank you.
story.
Rich legacy, man.
Yes.
Rich legacy. I'm appreciative.
And was she just in Georgetown County, which of course would be enough?
She was just in Georgetown County, but her impact was way further than Georgetown, and people would come from all over. People would come from all over. I remember at least twice a year, it was a whole family thing. You know, we had to go through the clubhouse and get ready to ship boxes to Jamaica. The church had 2 physical edifices in Jamaica, and through the missions department, that was just what she did. Whether there were burnout victims or people who just, in this news, well, this is one of her district president schedules that she would put out yearly. And so when you open it up, it had the 30 or so churches that she would have to go and visit and get her report from, and then, But, man, I'm getting so lost and flooded with memories. Great memories. She was a great person, man. She was a great person.
And she was born in 1919, so she lived into the
1999.
Wow.
1999, interestingly enough, I had come home. It was November because I was going to New York for Thanksgiving and I wanted to see my family. So I came, I was living in Atlanta, and I drove to Georgetown for the weekend and hung out with them. And I'll never forget, I was in my classroom, and I'd gotten a call. I just got to school. I said, oh my God, I hope I'm not in trouble for being late. Foreshadowing, right, Joy? And I'd gotten a call. Mr. Bonds, you need to come to the office. Jesus, what is this so early in the morning? Turns out someone from home had called. She and my grandfather had been involved in a car accident. They were coming from Bucksport, from an old member's house. Even in her retirement, her members still meant something to her. And she hadn't pastored the family she was going to visit in 30 years or more. But the family, Leola Burrows, I remember her very well. She would, Truman, we were talking about families, large families before this started. Leola Burrows had 19 children. So you know she knew how to stock up on food. And she was an excellent cook, and so every now and again she would call my grandparents. Says, Dentley, I've got something out here for y'all. Y'all come on and get it. She didn't have a car, couldn't drive. And lo and behold, my grandparents had gone to Bucksport to pick up the bounty. And on their way home, I can hear her right now saying to my grandfather, Dentley, I want something to eat. And they were turning into Wendy's. And someone ran through a yellow light and T-boned their car. And that's, interestingly enough, how she transitioned this life. But she lived a full life. And I believe that when that happened, God said, well done. So. Any other questions? Y'all gonna make me cry again.
Well, we can say well done to her life, but also to your memories of her life. Thank you so much, Dedric Bonds, for being with us today and sharing those with us, because now your memories of her and of that time and what she did for the community, now they become our memories, and we can share them and keep them going forward and inspiring others.
Thank you.
So we are just grateful for you and for being such a good friend of the library. Always an open invitation to come back again and again. And we'll have your other half.
That's right.
Equal, I won't say better half because y'all.
Oh, we'll go with better, man. We'll go with better.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Y'all are both
I'm
so
happy
good.
married, wife.
Yeah. But Joy will be with us coming up in this series, Digibridge 2.0, coming up in May at the Andrews Library. So we're looking forward to that as well. That'll be another wonderful presentation. But thank you so much for being with us, and thanks to South Carolina Humanities.
Yes, thank you to South Carolina Humanities for making the Digibridge possible in Georgetown Campus, the library.
And again, we'll give another round of applause.